Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ with us, and always great to have him on, always with great nuggets on his timeline. If you haven't watched, you should, and if you haven't followed him, you absolutely should. Brett, thanks for your time. It's been 2 or 3 weeks, a lot's been going on. In your opinion, with where we are now on the verge of the championship game on Monday, has everything kind of settled down with this 12-team playoff the way it's been run now that we have more evidence? Or is there still going to be, is still like a big need for some tinkering to be done?
Well, I don't necessarily think anything's settled down. I think they were going to wait until after this 12-team playoff played out to decide what they want to do going forward in 2026. That could remain at 12 teams. It could go to 14. It could go to 140 if they want. That has not been finalized or determined. However, what has happened from people I've talked to throughout the industry, and I reported this a week or so ago, there is real momentum to next season, which is the final year of the contract, to tweak the seeding process. Now, this is the final year of the contract, so to make any changes, you have to have 1,000% uniformity across the board. Everyone involved has to agree. All the commissioners, all the university presidents, and yes, even ESPN. What they will consider, and they will discuss this week in Atlanta, the commissioners, is the 5 conference champions will still get their automatic bids. The difference, though, is if they go by the selection seedings, as opposed to automatically putting those 4 highest conference champs, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, for instance, if you would have done that this year and kept the seedings, the rankings based on the seedings, it's still giving the automatic bids to the conference champs, Boise State, Clemson, Arizona State. Boise State, Arizona State, and Clemson all would have played their first-round games on the road. Penn State, Texas, Oregon, and Georgia would have received the first-round buys. Well, how would that change things? Well, the semifinal games that we just watched, Smokey, would have been the exact same matchups in the quarterfinals. And the other 2 quarterfinal games would have been number 1 Oregon versus number 8 Indiana, and number 2 Georgia versus number 7 Tennessee. So looking at this, I think the biggest issue with this year's playoff, especially for people out west, is Oregon got totally screwed being the number 1 seed because they had a harder path to the playoff than Texas did, than Penn State did, than Notre Dame did. And that shouldn't be the case when you're the number 1 seed. And so if you would have went by the ranking, the selection committee rankings, and just slotted them in that order, and then again, Boise State, Arizona State, Clemson, they still get in, even though they may not be in the top 12, but because they won their conference, but they come in at the 9th seed and the 11th seed and the 12th seed instead of the 3rd seed and the 4th seed. The fact that, and I know, look, Arizona State could have, would have, should have, probably should have beat Texas. Boise State hung with Penn State a little bit. Penn State, some turnovers, whatever. But ultimately, you should not have the number 3 seed and number 4 seed of any tournament being a double-digit underdog against a team that's seeded 6, 7, or 5. So that's something they will consider. So you're probably wondering, well, why would the Big 12 and the ACC do that? Because basically, potentially, it's costing them a first-round bye. From the people I talked to, I believe both conferences are open for that. Because, again, this is just for 1 year. And I think both of those conferences certainly could, make it an olive branch, if you will, to the Big Ten and the SEC saying, hey, look, we're willing to bend and let the seedings take precedent instead of the automatic top 4 seeds based on conference championship. If going forward in 2026, maybe you consider us and give us something a little bit, down the road in that way. Because if the Big 12 and the ACC just simply said, screw it, we're going to keep it how it is, we get our first round bye, then the Big 10 and SEC could say, okay, fine, good luck when we figure out what we're going to do in 2026 because we own the hammer, you don't. So it's something certainly that they'll talk about. Personally, I hope they do it because I think it makes it a more true playoff because the seedings aren't all wonky. Because just because you win a conference and you get a top 4 seed, when if you're not in the top 4, quite frankly, you don't deserve it.
Brett, just as a college football fan and also, analyst and critic, but somebody who's watched the game for a very long time at this point, you certainly were probably like many of us in the 80s, the 90s of like, man, one day it'd be so awesome if there's a college football playoff. Even though it needs some tweaks, this is just the first year of 12. What have been your thoughts on what you've actually seen and how it's developed up to this point where we're now preparing for Ohio State and Notre Dame?
That's far.
So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
I'm hearing far.
Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness.
I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
Yeah, it's kind of, and you're right. Everyone cries out for it. And when we went to 12, I kind of probably mentioned it to you guys in the past. It's like just because we've got 12 doesn't mean we're going to have a new champion. It's still going to be the usual suspects. And I thought we saw that in the semis. Again, if the seedings would have been different, if the seedings would have been based on the rankings, I think we would have had Oregon and Georgia versus, Notre Dame and Ohio State is our semis, and that's pretty much who we get every year anyway. So I think it's good, though. I think it added a lot of interest and a lot of drama for a lot of towns that maybe haven't had it in the past. It got people engaged, and you had people, certain pockets of the country rooting for or against other areas of the country because it may or may not help their teams or their conferences as far as getting into the playoff. But no, I think it's great. I think it's a good idea. It's not going to get smaller. Once it reaches 12, it's never going to go back to 8. It's never going to go back to 10, 4, 6, whatever number you want. It's just going to keep growing. I think they go to 14 in 2026. And that simply may mean just another SEC and Big Ten make the field, but I liked it. I know you guys enjoyed the arguments about all the 3-loss SEC teams that should have got in, and it's just that's the imperfection of the college football playoff is there's no simple formula that tells you if you do A, B, C, and D, you're in the playoff. All we know is if you win a conference championship, you're in. And then after that, it's just subjective. And somebody tweeted this out the other day, and this just shows why if you just go simply power ratings, this is why nobody will ever be satisfied. Guess who's ranked number 4 in the ESPN Football Power Index ranking currently?
Alabama.
After the bowl game. You're correct, sir. They did not drop one spot after losing as a 17-point underdog to Michigan. So that's my biggest issue with if you just go simply power ratings is those teams literally never change. Once they're locked in there, you can win or lose as many games and you're still going to be in there. But yeah, Paul, to answer your question, I think it was great. It got a lot more people involved. Hopefully they'll figure out the seeding element of it. And, it's going to change, and hopefully they'll learn from it. And I just wonder, the other thing I think real quick they're going to look at, and I don't think there's any definitive answer either way. There's critics and proponents for both sides of this, is because the teams that had the first round bye, do you put the second round on campus also? Because there's a lot of concern about teams traveling. You've got Ohio State, they had a home game, then they go to Pasadena, then they go to Dallas, and now they're going to Atlanta. How many Ohio State fans can actually afford to make all of those stops? I don't know the answer to that. Is that a concern? Yes or no? I would guess it is. Well, if you go first two games at home, then you've only got half of the fan bases traveling in those first two games because two of the fan bases stay at home. That's less travel. but obviously that's a big impact to the bowl games. And also, if that happens, that means no January 1st bowl games, which means kiss the Rose Bowl goodbye. So that would be fascinating to see, what talks they have about potentially putting the second round games on campus as well. But that definitely will not happen for 2025. That's something to look forward to in 2026 and beyond.
Brett, I'll just tell you, if they do get rid of the New Year Six as the sites, I would personally love it, because I think eventually the typewriter, the horse and buggy, things got to go and change, and on-campus games are just better. But I want to go back to something you said earlier about the Big 12 and ACC not fighting it. Don't you think also, given the fact that the SEC took a little bit of they took a little bit of an inside pitch. They got plunked a little here on their braggadocious nature this season, and parity bit them in the butt. That it's time for the Big 12 and ACC to kind of bet on themselves and say, fine, we'll change the rules and say maybe we will get the first round bye. You guys can't just get everything. Whether it's true or not, you maybe need to kind of steal from their playbook and promote yourself.
Yeah, and I don't think they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I think, people that, and I know a lot of fans think this, well, there's no SEC team in the championship for the second year in a row. Well, the SEC's losing all their power. No, they're not. They still have all the money. They still got them in the Big Ten, or, however you rank them, Godzilla, King Kong, your favorite monster. Whichever one you want to assign to either conference, they're still the two biggest bullies on the block. And whether they win or lose a national championship is not going to reduce their power. But yeah, I think Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips are obviously, going to, promote their leagues and do everything they can about their leagues. But, I don't know if the power would shift any just because the SEC or the Big Ten has a down year, because that can change every year. And again, keep in mind, this is a 12-year contract. We're in year 11 now. And then when we go to the new contract in 2026, I would guess that would probably be a minimum of 6 years to do that. So, I think Arizona State showed anybody can beat anybody. And to be very, looking at it now, and it's so easy. I know the bowl games, you got some guys playing, some guys not. I know it's a mismatch of different things. But wow, I just think and when I say we, I say the selection committee, the AP poll. I think everybody that doesn't live in Provo, Utah, severely underrated BYU. And just because they didn't make the Big 12 playoff, just because they lost the head-to-head with Arizona State and they didn't make it. Because you look at how they played, they were one of the 12 best teams, and you can't convince me otherwise. But unfortunately, because the way it's set up, they didn't get in, and all we heard about was the 3-loss SEC teams crying every day about they should be in, where I think BYU actually, had a more valid argument that they should have been in the field.
Yeah, and I hope that whatever giving and taking there is, if they stay at 12 or go to another number, that it doesn't get so flipped because of the power, even though we understand the Big Ten and SEC, as you mentioned, because you also said it's cyclical. I don't know if it'll be cyclical anymore because these two huge conferences, but I think that if you're ACC or the Big 12, yeah, you're going to have to give in a little bit, but I think you need to hold your ground, not that you will win that battle in the end.
Well, you bring up a good point, and this has been reported by myself and others in the past several months. The Big Ten and the SEC, one of the suggestions, proposals, recommendations, however you want to phrase it, for the upcoming playoffs starting in 2026 is for each of those leagues to get 4 guaranteed bids in the playoffs. So basically, their top 4 teams are automatically in the field. So that's one reason you would go to 14, because if you're going to give them 4 each, that's 8. Are you really going to have a 12-team playoff when 2/3 are automatically locked into those 2
leagues?
Right. No,
yep.
you go to 14 to do that. So if you're going to give the Big Ten and SEC that, then I guess the give would be, okay, we're going to add 2 more spots to get it to 14. For some reason, and maybe this will change, they don't want 16. I don't know why. I think, well, one reason I know why is because ESPN would have to pay more money for a 16-team playoff. Like going to 14, they don't have to pay more money than they do with the 12-team playoff. And also, do we really want to see number 1 seed, whoever it is, play number 16 seed, whoever that is, and be a 17-point favorite and see club that team? But oh wait, Alabama lost as a 17-point favorite. So I think there will be some give and take. But again, ultimately, and everyone's like, well, why doesn't the Big 12 or the ACC say they're not going to do this? Look, the Big 12 and the ACC don't have to agree to this. They don't have to. Neither does Conference USA and the MAC and all that. And then you force the Big 10 and the SEC, into a corner, and they say, okay, fine, we're gonna take our ball over here, and we're gonna have our own college football playoff with just our 2 leagues, and you guys go do your own playoff without us and see how that works out. So that's why, if some people are wondering why doesn't the other leagues push back on this, because you can only do so much, and without the other side basically saying, you know what, we're fed up with this. We're tired of, we want to do things a certain way. We want to, play up to our strengths. I don't think the SEC or Big Ten wants to hold a playoff without the other conferences. But if it's an ultimatum, we get this, or you don't get so many X number of bids or whatever it is, then they're going to be playing a giant game of chicken. And I'm pretty sure the Big Ten and the SEC won't blink first.
Brett, what do you think about the we get blue bloods in the final, which, isn't the, NCAA tournament, George Mason, St. Peter's, a heartwarming story, but there are also blue bloods who have not won in a decade and 35 years, 36 years. So it's not the same old, same old. Do you think this is a good matchup? Do you think Notre Dame can hang?
Well, we'll find out if it's a good match. I think Ohio State wins. I think they win comfortably. I think with Notre Dame, I just think they've been very fortunate. And look, they deserve to be there. I understand that. But when you look at them, they beat him. They held off Indiana. Which that game probably wasn't as close as the final score. But also Notre Dame basically broke that open on a 98-yard run, which you play 100 games, you're probably not going to have that 98-yard run in the other 99 games, but you do, you win that game. And then you face a backup quarterback against Georgia, and then you return a kickoff for a touchdown, which is, a 10% chance at best. And also you had Georgia make crucial mistakes. You got a kid bumping the ref on the sideline. You got Georgia jumping off sides on 4th and 1. You've got a number of 50-50 plays that all went Notre Dame's issue. But hey, great. Notre Dame took advantage of that and they won. Then they beat Penn State in a game that, I guess depending on who you're rooting for, could probably make an argument Penn State probably could have won, maybe should have won. I don't know. But ultimately, Notre Dame won. Well, guess what? Penn State's wide receivers had 0 catches. That's not because Notre Dame's secondary is the greatest on the face of the earth. It's because Penn State's got some of the worst wide receivers in the country. They have the best tight end in the country, but they have the worst wide receivers. Well, now who do they get? They get Ohio State against arguably one of the deepest wide receiver and skill position cores in the country that, by the way, is playing better than it's played all year since the loss to Michigan. They are a different team. I'm going to ask Chip Kelly this in Atlanta on Saturday and Sunday. Like, what are you doing differently? This is a different team. It's a different philosophy. It's a different attack on offense. Jeremiah Smith was totally shut down by Texas, but they had other guys step up. And if not for some stupid, untimely penalties against Texas, unsportsmanlike conduct by Henderson, there was a holding play. Ohio State, could have put that thing out of reach in the first half, but they didn't. I just think Ohio State's defense is as good as Notre Dame's. I just think there's a huge difference offensively with Ohio State and Notre Dame's offenses. And I won, how healthy is Love for Notre Dame at running back? He was incredible against Penn State, that 2 or 3 yard touchdown run. You see, broke 5 tackles or whatever, was incredible. But I just think Ohio State, to cut my analysis down to 5 seconds, the team with the best players usually wins, and Ohio State has really, really good players, and I don't think Notre Dame is as deep. And, oh, by the way, Notre Dame starting left tackle is out, and that's certainly not going to help against that Ohio State defense that put the heat on Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel the past few weeks.
Brett, as always, enjoy your travel over the next few days leading up to Monday night's championship game. We've appreciated you, and we're not done with you. I know you're going to try to hide from us, but appreciate your time as always, and have a great rest of your week. There's always something to discuss.
I can run, but I can't hide from you guys. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Brett. Brett McMurphy. What a great guest. We've had him on many, many times. We appreciate him.